Hi everyone, today I will be going through chapter 14, which is coordination and responses. This chapter is a big chapter, so I will be dividing this video into two parts. So this is part 1 right now, and later I will be posting the part 2. And I'm also not following an order of chapters. I'm just focusing more on chapters which are more difficult. So yeah, let's get into the chapter. So coordination and response is mostly about the nervous system, okay, and we should be aware of the role of the nervous system, which is coordination and regulation of body functions. Now let's say how what our life would be like if we did not have the nervous system. Okay, so let's say you're cooking. Okay, example, you're cooking and this is your pot. Okay, and over here this is your fire, and your pot is really hot. Okay, it's really hot. Okay, and while you're cooking you accidentally touch your hot pot. Now a normal person with a nervous system, what they would do is that they would move away their hand quickly, okay, because it's really hot. Okay, and that happens because of our nervous system. It's because our spinal cord and our brain are acting in it. Okay, because of that we pull away our hand. But let's say we don't have the nervous system, then we would just not pull away our hand. Okay, we won't even feel much. Okay, we won't even feel much temperature or changes in our environment, and we would keep on burning our hand. Okay, and we would get hurt, and not only this way, in many other ways as well. Okay, so this is why we require the nervous system. We need the nervous system. Now let's look into more depth of the nervous system. So we have two types of nervous system. We have the central nervous system and we have the peripheral nervous system. So the short forms is CNS and PNS. So if you see CNS anywhere, it means central nervous system, and if you see PNS anywhere, it's peripheral nervous system. So let's look into central nervous system first. So central nervous system consists of brain and spinal cord only. Okay, there's no other organ involved in the central nervous system. Okay, and its function is to receive impulses from receptors, and it is for sending impulses to effectors. Now let's look into what receptors, impulses, and effectors mean. Okay, because they seem like an unfamiliar word that we won't really use in our daily life. So the impulses basically means something which carries information, or something that transports information. Okay, transports information. Okay, receptors are basically something that detect stimuli. Stimuli is basically change in something, detecting a change. Okay, detecting change. So the receptors, basically they just detect change. Okay, that's their function, and they are inside all of our sense organs. Now what are sense organs? I will list it down over here. Sense organs. So it's basically anything that can detect changes. Okay, like for example our eyes can detect changes in light. Okay, so at bright light our eyes would react in a different way than it would be reacting in dim light. Okay, and then our ears, okay, they can detect sound, okay, which can alert us. And our skin, which can detect touch or stimuli. Okay, so when someone touches us or when something hot touches us, we would react. Okay, because it has receptors inside. Okay, Next would be what else? Tongue, or some people say mouth as well. It detects taste. And last but not least, it's our nose. It can detect smell. Okay, so all these sense organs, they have something called receptor cells. Okay, so the receptor cells are actually the cells that help detect these things. Okay, so now if you have eyes but your receptor cells are not working, then basically your eye won't be able to react in different light intensities. Okay, so similarly, if your skin does not have working receptor cells, you won't be able to feel touch or hot things or cold things. You won't be able to feel anything. Okay, now let's look into what effectors are. So effectors are basically anything that helps us carry out a reaction. Okay, helps carry out reaction. Alright, so let's say you touch something hot, okay, and then you suddenly move away your hand. You're doing that because your effector is basically asking you to do it. Not asking you, but it's making you do it. Okay, your effector is making you do it because it received information from your brain. Your brain is basically, over here, this is your brain, let's say, your brain. Okay, it's basically telling you to move away your hand. Move away your hand. Okay, it's asking you to do that, and your effectors is basically just listening to your brain. Okay, that's pretty much what an effector is, and you can find your effectors in your muscles and glands. Okay, muscles and glands, so they are in your muscles, in simple words. Okay, this is a diagram to help you understand more. So in your central nervous system, we have brain, spinal cord, anything else. Okay, all these rest of these veins, they are included in your peripheral nervous system. So let's look into neurons now. So neurons are basically just a path or a route which impulses take, okay, to travel. Alright, again, you must know what neurons are. Okay, and now you have 3 types of neurons which you have to go through, which are quite simple, by the way. So sensory neurons, they just carry impulses from sensory organs to the central nervous system. Just now we went through sensory organs. It's basically organs that have receptor cells in it which detect change in environment or anything like that. Okay, so sensory organs, okay, they feel something and then they tell the brain that I felt this thing, and then the brain gives a solution to that and sends it to effector so that the effector can listen to the brain and carry out the information. Seems confusing, but listen closely and you will understand. Okay, and you have to know the diagram of the neuron. You have to memorize the diagram. Now, if it helps, one thing which is different in sensory neuron is that it has this round thing over here. This round thing over here is basically your receptor cell. Okay, it's a receptor cell that you won't find anywhere else. Okay, there's no receptor cell here, there's no receptor cell here. Okay, it's something that you won't find anywhere else. So this is one way you can remember the sensory neuron. Next is your motor neuron, which carries impulses from your central nervous system to your effectors. Again, as I mentioned previously, effectors carry out reaction. Carry out a reaction to a certain stimuli. Okay, so the central nervous system, okay, your brain or spinal cord is telling the effector to do something, and the effector actually does that. Okay, it comes from the word effect. Okay, so effect means when something affects, when something when a change occurs. Okay, that's what basically effect means. So that's where the word effector came from. Okay, and again, you also have to memorize the motor neuron, okay, how it looks like. And next is the relay neuron. So the relay neuron is inside central nervous system. This is the only neuron which is only inside central nervous system. You will not find it in your peripheral nervous system. Alright, and basically the only function of this is to connect sensory to motor neuron, because the sensory and motor neurons, they don't connect with each other, they don't touch each other. Okay, they have this neuron in between them, okay, which is connecting them. Okay, again, you have to remember how the diagram of a relay neuron looks like. Alright, so now let's look into reflex arc. So reflex arc basically just involves reflex action, and you must memorize the definition of reflex action because it's in our syllabus. Alright, so reflex action is just automatically and rapidly integrating and coordinating stimuli with the responses of effectors. Okay, in this chapter you will hear effectors, receptors, neurons, electrical impulses, CNS, PNS, so many times. Okay, so it is crucial for you to be able to know what each of these words mean and what they do. Okay, now I don't know how I can help you with the definition, you just have to memorize this. Okay, let's look into the reflex arc now. So the reflex arc is basically just the pathway that which the impulses take in order for us to carry out a response. Okay, so the first thing that happens is that we detect stimuli. Now how do we detect stimuli? We detect it from our sensory organs. Okay, which is basically our skin, our nose, our eyes, our ears, our tongue. Okay, now they detect you basically have stimuli in one of the sensory organs. Okay, and then the receptors are the one that will detect. Okay, you will just carry out a change in sensory organ, okay, which is called stimuli, and then your stimuli will be detected by your receptors. Okay, they will detect the change. Okay, and then the impulses from the receptors will travel in this neuron. Again, as I said, neuron is a path. Okay, so your receptor cells will send your impulses from the receptor cells will move in your sensory neuron. They will take the sensory neuron path. Okay, and then from there they will go to relay neuron. As I mentioned earlier, relay neuron connects sensory neuron to motor neuron. Therefore, the impulses will not straight away travel to motor neuron. They will first travel to relay neuron. In some cases, okay, you can also write spinal cord. Now, the reason for that is because this is a reflex arc, which means this is a reflex action. Okay, now reflex action is basically an involuntary action, and in involuntary action you don't think. Okay, like for example, when you poke a needle which is really sharp, you automatically remove your hand. You're not thinking, it just automatically and just randomly happens. Alright, you're not thinking, you're not using your brain. Okay, so now the reason we don't use our brain is because we have to carry out a response quick and fast, or else we would hurt us. So because of that, the impulses will go to the spinal cord instead. It won't go to the brain, it will go here first. Okay, so you can write relay neuron or you can write spinal cord. It would be accepted either ways. Okay, so from there it's gonna go to your motor neuron. So impulses will take this path, okay, which will send your impulses to effectors, which basically make us carry out a response. Okay, so again, seems confusing, but if you understand what each of these things do over here, it will be quite easy for you to understand. Okay, let's look into synapses now. So synapses is a junction between two neurons. Now the neurons, okay, they don't connect with each other. Okay, they're not touching each other. There is a gap in between. Now this gap is called a synapse. Okay, this gap is called the synapse, which is a junction between two neurons. You also have to memorize this definition. Now over here, you have to look at the diagram over here. So this is your presynaptic membrane. Okay, your presynaptic membrane, your postsynaptic membrane. This is your synaptic gap, or some people call it synaptic cleft. Okay, and then over here, these circles, these tiny circles, are called vesicles. Okay, now these vesicles have these dots inside of them, which are called the neurotransmitter molecules. And then you have these over here, which are called receptor proteins. Okay, and over here, this is your sensory neuron, which is sending impulses. Okay, now let's look into the steps. So number one, the first thing that happens, okay, is that impulses stimulates vesicles. So over here you have your sensory neuron, okay, and your impulse is being sent. Now you come to the end of sensory neuron, and your impulse wants to travel to your relay neuron now. Now in order to do that, it has to go through the synapse. So over here, this is your impulse. Okay, hold on, why is this not working? Okay, this is your impulse. Now what the impulse does is that it triggers, okay, it stimulates the vesicle, it triggers the vesicles, okay. Now after that, what happens is this, okay, the vesicles will release the neurotransmitter molecules. So when these vesicles are stimulated by the impulses, the neurotransmitter molecules are released out of the vesicles, okay, they're released out and they diffuse into your synaptic gap, okay, which is number 3. Okay, the neurotransmitter molecules will diffuse across the synaptic gap, and then they will bind with the receptor proteins on the next neuron. So these over here are called the receptor proteins, okay, and it binds with them, okay, and then they move to the next neuron. So that's how this works. Okay, I will repeat this again. Number 1, the impulse will stimulate or trigger the vesicles. The vesicles will release the neurotransmitter molecules, and it will diffuse across this synaptic gap or synaptic cleft, and then they will bind with the receptor protein and then move on to the next neuron. Okay, now over here, this is a diagram related to the reflex arc. So if you feel a bit confused, you can look into this. Okay, this is your sensory neuron. Okay, this over here is your synapse. Okay, because they have this little gap over here. This is your relay neuron, another synapse, and then this is your motor neuron. And over here, we have your effectors in your muscle. Alright, so next. Now, again, we have the mention of sense organs. Now over here, it's giving the definition, which are basically group of receptor cells responding to specific stimuli. Biology students know that the organs are basically made up of a lot of cells, okay? They're made up of group of cells. Now, sense organs are made up of specifically receptor cells, okay? And their function is to respond to specific stimuli. You have to memorize this definition as it is required. Okay, now let's look into sensitivity now, which is a new word that we've come across. So sensitivity is just the ability to detect stimuli to make appropriate responses. I feel like this is really self-explanatory, so I'm not going to focus much on it, but you have to memorize the definition. Let's look into the eye now. So the eye again is a part of the sense organ, and it has different ways on how it reacts in different light intensities. Okay, so now this is called pupil reflex. Okay, so in bright light it reacts differently to when it reacts than in dim light. Okay, eye reacts differently in bright light compared to dim light. Okay, so in bright light your iris decreases the diameter of pupil. Okay, so over here this diagram here shows you. Okay, this is your iris over here. This brown part is your iris. Okay, and this part is your pupil. Okay, and yeah, so the bright light will decrease the diameter of pupil. So sorry, in bright light the iris will decrease diameter of pupil, and in less light reaches the retina. Okay, I'm so sorry guys, I'm really getting confused here. So okay, iris decreases diameter of pupil in bright light, and less light reaches the retina. One thing you should know is that the retina is really sensitive to light. So if you have excessive exposure to retina, your eyesight could be affected. Okay, so that's why the iris will decrease diameter of pupil, so that less light reaches the retina, so that it doesn't get damaged. Okay, so this is over here is your iris. Okay, and it will contract. Okay, and this pupil will become smaller. And in dim light the opposite happens. Okay, over here I made a mistake. I will correct it right now. Okay, what I mean is iris increases diameter of pupil. Okay, so iris will increase the diameter of pupil so that more light can reach retina, so that we can see more clearly at night. Alright, so yeah, you just have to memorize the bright light part. The dim light is just going to be the opposite of bright light. So now is control of light intensity, which is basically the same thing, but it's more of an extended thing. Okay, so in this you will have radial and circular muscles involved. Now these muscles are antagonistic muscles. So antagonistic muscles are basically muscles like for example, if one thing goes up the other will go down, something like that. Okay, they're gonna go in opposite directions. Okay, so for example, if let's say your two of your friends are living in different area. Okay, one is living in, let's say, Malaysia. Okay, and it's 8 a.m. here. Okay, and you're basically waking up, but your other friend lives in, like, I don't know, Canada, and over there it's 8 p.m. instead. So when you wake up, this person sleeps. Okay, so it's like opposite actions happening. So this is called antagonistic muscles. Okay, so when the light increases, your circular muscles will contract and your radial muscles will relax. Let's look into the diagram over here. Okay, so you have your circular muscles. In bright light they will contract. Okay, they will contract and they will make your pupil, which is circular, smaller. Okay, it will make it this smaller, this much smaller, because you're circular, it's being smaller. Okay, contract means in this case contract means making the pupil smaller. Okay, contraction of circular muscle means making the pupil smaller. Okay, and the relaxation of radial muscles also contributes to decreasing the diameter of the pupil. Okay, again, there isn't much to explain for this. You just have to memorize this, and you only have to memorize one. You can choose either this one or this one, it's same thing. You should know that if the light decreases, it's just gonna be the opposite of light increases. Okay, next is accommodation. So accommodation means, in simple word, it means focusing. Okay, so it's the process in which the eyes sees different objects at different distances. Okay, so when you're looking at something near you, your eye will react differently, and if you look at something away from you, your eyes will react in a different way. Okay, so this part involves two main parts of your eye, which is ciliary muscles, and suspensory ligaments. Okay, again, for this part there's not much explanation to do. You should just know that the ciliary muscles, they relax when looking at distant things, and your suspensory ligaments will contract. Okay, just memorize this. The near one is just the opposite of whatever the distant one is. Okay, next let's look into the retina. So retina, as I said, it's a really sensitive part of your eye, and this is basically where your images are formed as well. Okay, so when you're looking at something, it's because an image is being formed at your retina. That's why you can see something. And if this thing gets damaged, you cannot see clearly, or you can't see anything at all. You could become blind. Now let's look into rods and cones. Okay, so rods are basically in retina, okay, but they're in specific places, meaning that you can find them anywhere except blind spot and phobia. These are the two places you can't find them, but rest of it you can find them anywhere else except of these two spots. Okay, now these rod cells are sensitive for night vision, so meaning that when you're at a dark place, let's say you're walking outside at night, your rod cells are working hard, okay, because they're sensitive to the night vision. Okay, and they will form images in the form they will form images in the shades of gray. Okay, they won't form colorful images, they will form images in the shades of gray. Okay, it's very self-explanatory. Next we have cones. Okay, now cones are mostly in phobia. Okay, there's high concentration of cones in your phobia. They're sensitive to bright light, and they have different cones to absorb different colors. Okay, so you will have different cone which absorbs red, different cones that absorbs green, different cones that absorb blue. Okay, it's something like that. One way of differentiating which one is for night and which one is for color or for bright light, C stands for color. Okay, in rods you don't have C. Okay, in cones you have color. So cones is basically for bright light. Okay, so rods will obviously be the opposite. It will be for the night vision. So yeah, this is the part 1. In part 2 I will be focusing more in other chapters as well. Okay, also one more thing, you should memorize this diagram of the eye, which is really important. Okay, you have to memorize all this. And I will list down, okay, I will go through again and list down the things you should remember. So first thing I want you to remember is the central and peripheral nervous system. Okay, so central nervous system, brain, and spinal cord. Okay, peripheral nervous system, nerves outside central nervous system. Okay, next thing you should know is receptors. Okay, detects stimuli. And you should know effectors. Don't mind my handwriting, I am writing fast, so it's not going to be that neat, because I'm pretty sure the video is quite long. So the effectors carries response, carries out response. Okay, what else? What else do you need to know? Oh yeah, where they're located as well. So your receptor located in your sense organs, your effectors located in your muscles and glands, Okay. You should also know what are your sense organs, which is really helpful, by the way. You should also memorize all the definitions that I've listed over here. You also have to memorize how each diagram of each type of neuron looks like. Also, you have to memorize the diagram of a synapse as well, and you also have to memorize how the impulses travel in a synapse. Okay, and this memorizing this will also be helpful, this diagram, because in past papers these type of diagrams come out a lot. And yeah, you should memorize this. Okay, just remember to memorize one of this, and dim light or whatever is the opposite, it's gonna be the opposite of whatever you memorized over here. Okay, so iris decreases diameter of pupil in bright light, so dim light is going to be the opposite, which means iris will increase instead. Okay, and yeah, basically just go through these notes. If you would like me to give you these notes, you can email me, I will send you the notes. Okay, and this is pretty much it. If you find anything confusing, or if you have any tips of how I can improve my video, then you can comment and I will reply to you as soon as possible. Again, I'm also offering tuition in Malaysia. I'm offering online tuition for IGCSE students, so you can email me, which is in my description box. Okay, you can email me and I will get back to you as soon as possible. So for now, this is part 1. You can go to part 2 to watch the other part. And yeah, that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like my video, and if you like my content, please don't forget to subscribe as well. Thank you.